Hello everybody, it's your Queer Great Auntie here, and full disclosure, I thought I recorded this video a few days ago, and the mysterious "I'm sure I pressed that button but still somehow it didn't record" thing happened. Only the first time that's happened, so we're doing pretty well in the whole technological stakes. So I'm here today with Snowy, my actor friend Kat, who's a stage cat. But what I want to talk to you about is my queer great auntie and why it's important that we de-erase ourselves from history, claim those parts of history where we find ourselves as LGBTQIA plus people, and why this helps us to build a sense of ourselves and a sense of our future. I'll try not to make it too long, but who knows, I'm a waffler. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Kathleen Lynn. Here she is on the cover of this book by Marie Mullen, an amazing Irish historian and queer historian. The book itself is called The Politics and Relationships of Kathleen Lynn. And it was sent to me very kindly by Marie Mulholland. The reason I call Kathleen Lynn, or Dr. Lynn as I usually think of her, the reason I call her my queer great auntie is not because of any genetic relationship, any more than I'm genetically related to anyone else in Irish history and indeed anyone else around the world, but because I grew up with a sense of her in my house. So the house I grew up in, it had belonged to my great grandmother, known as Mamo, who Snowy knows very well. And she rented it out for decades to Kathleen Lynn, who had her home there, ran her GP surgery there, and lived there for about 40 years, I think, with her partner, Madeline French Mullen. That last bit I didn't know about until within the last 20 years. So I grew up knowing that Dr. Lynn had lived in our house, that she had commissioned for a balcony to be built onto the back of the main bedroom, that she slept out there in all weathers, rain, hail, and snow, because she believed in fresh air. And hey, it worked for her. She also had some cats in the house, and the story I grew up on with that was that my great grandmother was living next door at the time and was keeping some very fancy chickens, white chickens, but that Kathleen Lynn had cats. And one day the cats were fighting on the wall that divided the two back gardens, and they fell off the wall into the chicken coop. And basically the chickens died in the crossfire. They weren't targeted by the cats, they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I grew up in a house sort of knowing about this person who had inhabited it. It was like a positive haunting, if you will. I knew that she was friends as well as a tenant of my great grandmother, and that she had a part in the revolution that saw Ireland leaving the British Empire and beginning that process of dismantling it. I want to bring you now to 2005, when my mum still owned the house. She was working on various historical projects, including the memoir of my great grandmother, but which of course then included other figures like Dr. Lynn and Madeline French Mullen. And she was in touch with a historian called Sinead McCool, who was researching a lot of things about Dr. Lynn's life. And because she had lived for so long in the house I grew up in, they arranged to get a plaque on the house. And that all happened in 2005. So I was there at the unveiling and the launch and the whole thing, and lots of people came around, including people who remembered Dr. Lynn, either from her surgery, from her work with Onoiga, which is the youth hostel movement in Ireland, or the infant hospital that she set up, St. Ultan's, which involved basically most of the professional women doctors in the country because they couldn't get very good jobs elsewhere. But Dr. Lynn was also part of the Irish Citizens' Army, which was set up by James Connolly and others in the trade union movement. She was a medical officer and had a role within the Easter week of 1916, as did other people like Elizabeth O'Farrell, who was also in medicine. But yeah, so Dr. Lynn was this incredible, pioneering woman GP, setting up a hospital that was aiming to combat child poverty and illness in some of the worst urban poverty that were in the world at the time, in the 1910s and 20s. I knew all this about her. I knew she was wonderful, but I didn't know that she shared the house with her same gender partner and that they lived there together for over 30 years. I didn't find out that until maybe around 2005, maybe even a little bit later. And when I thought I really want to start looking into the life of Kathleen Lynn, which thankfully is becoming easier and easier, especially now that another historian, Mary McAuliffe, has co-published Kathleen Lynn's diaries, which she kept every day from 1916 up until her death in 1955. So there's suddenly a load of information out there that we can finally access, and maybe I'll even finally get around to using it one of these days. But I didn't know that she was a lesbian. And I felt cheated of a role model in my childhood. I felt cheated of not knowing this really essential part of someone that I had felt this close connection to my entire life. And Marie Mulholland, who wrote this book about the politics and relationships of Dr. Kathleen Lynn, she said that she actually didn't feel like she could attend that unveiling because there were still people who would not acknowledge the nature of the relationship between Kathleen Lynn and Madeline French Mullen. Now, the time that I went to university, and particularly, studying queer literature and literary history, there's always this kind of middle of the roadism around, well, in history they wouldn't have used the term lesbian or gay or trans or whatever the labels that we use now are, so we can't really put those kinds of expectations onto historical relationships. Women might have lived together all their lives as a practical solution for unmarried women, and sure, they might have. But as Marie Mulholland pointed out, it says in Kathleen Lynn's diaries that on the occasion of one of their birthdays, and unfortunately I can't currently remember which one it is, Kathleen Lynn says she goosed Madeline. Now, apologies for the crudity, but that's the term she used. And Marie Mulholland said, how could these generations of historians have read those diaries, read that entry, and then gone, but we can't put our sense of what a homosexual relationship is onto this? They were absolutely in a sexual, monogamous, long-term, committed, romantic relationship. They were a lesbian couple. And they weren't the only ones involved in the struggle for Irish independence from the British Empire. Elizabeth O'Farrell was another one who was there with her partner Julia Grennan in the GPO during Easter week. And Julia Grennan refused to leave the GPO because her love, Elizabeth, was there with her and she didn't want to leave her alone. These are not just people setting up a practical household. These are not just people who have a strong friendship. These are partners. If it had been legal, they would have been wives. They would have been married. You can absolutely bet. So I wanted to share with you why I think of her as my queer great auntie, because she was always there for me growing up. But I didn't know that she was my queer great auntie until after I had had to go through the whole rigmarole myself of understanding my own sexuality, of understanding my own place within both wider society and within the LGBTQIA plus community. I was over 30 before I had that kind of clarity. It shouldn't have taken me that long. And maybe it wouldn't have if I'd known that I had a queer great auntie. And I have heard some people, when talking about queer history particularly, and this kind of job of unburying our gays, unburying our heritage, how can we imagine ourselves in a future if we can't imagine ourselves in the past? And so I'm here today to give you permission. It might not be within, a field in which you're an expert, but if you feel that sense of affinity to someone in the past, to someone in your culture, in your heritage, and you have that sense they were not living a completely allo cis het lifestyle, or weren't living according to the gender norms of their time and place, you have every right to have them in your heart and in your mind as someone belonging to your community. So that's what I really wanted to share with everybody. And it's a bit of why I'm here saying that I'm your queer great auntie. Because it doesn't matter where or when you live. We have an extraordinary community. We have an incredible history right across time and space. And we will have a most remarkable future. So here's me and Snowy to give everybody some massive queer great auntie hugs from me and from my queer great auntie, to say we were always here. We're not some kind of new invention, and we sure as hell are not a phase. We are a fact. So I hope you're all enjoying Pride Month in whatever way you can. Okay. Stay safe, and lots of hugs from me.